Okay, so today I'm going to be showing you how I personally do vinegar eels. I'm going to show you two styles: the normal style, which is you put them in a bottle and they grow, and then the high density style, which it's kind of like microworms. We're going to start with the hold on, give me a second here. We're going to start with the standard style bottle, all that. And this is just some old nasty cherries I found in my freezer that expired like 2 years ago. So I'm going to put that in there for the vinegar eels. I'm just going to kind of shove it in there. A lot of people use apples. You can use apples, that works fine, but I've found other fruits work fine too. I'll generally use, well, whatever the oldest fruit is in my freezer. My dad likes to buy frozen fruit and then he forgets about it. So then my vinegar eels get it. So all is well. Alright, got those in there. You just kind of want to cover the bottom, maybe maybe like an inch or so. It doesn't really matter how much you have in there of that. And then you're going to want to use, well, I haven't used, this is just tap water that has been dechlorinated. I haven't used non-dechlorinated water, but I suspect it would probably work fine. Then I'm going to put a funnel on top here. And I know y'all can't see this. I don't have a thing that's far enough away. And then we're going to shoot for half apple cider vinegar, half water. And it doesn't need to be half dechlorinated water. And it doesn't need to be exact, it doesn't really matter. Okay, that looks good. Did a bit over there, but that's okay. Alright, so we got that. Now we need to add our culture. Generally these, your starters will come in like a bag or something. Sometimes you'll get them in, like a bottle like this. And I'll show you all the vinegar eels later, but this is just a bottle that has, a culture going in it. But anyways, what I'm going to be doing, actually, is using a high-density culture. Right, I need to move this thing so you can see it. But it's just, a little high-density culture here. Let me get the lid off. I'm not sure if y'all will be able to see this or not. But you can see they kind of, you can't really tell on camera. Maybe right there a little bit. But they crawl up the side just like microworms do, so you don't have, in high density culture, so you don't have to, like mess with the vinegar or whatever. So I'm going to be using this high density culture to make this standard culture here. I'm just going to take a little bit on the tip of this paintbrush and swirl it around in there. I haven't done this, but it should work fine. I don't suspect why, I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't. So there, got some on my paintbrush. I just scraped the top of this culture and shoving it in. Give it in a bit of a swirl up. And removing it. Wash my paintbrush off in a tank there. So y'all can see that stuff coming down, maybe. And that's the vinegar eels. Mixed in with a little bit of mashed potatoes. So that's a standard culture. And if you don't have a high density culture, you can just pour your standard culture in just a little bit and it'll start a new one. So this one's done. Some people, like I prefer a kind of a narrow mouth bottle as opposed to like a wide mouth like this one, like one that tapers up more. Because I just think it's easier just to take a syringe and, they're more concentrated in the top because they like to swim to the top. Some people like to put filter floss in there and then you can like fill it up with some water so you don't get the vinegar. But I mean, you're not putting much vinegar in your tank. You're putting like 20 milliliters in or so, like max, not even that. Probably closer to like 5. So, that shouldn't really mess with your pH or anything unless you're in like a super tiny tank, like one the size of this bottle or something. But yeah, so that's the standard culture. And yeah, how you feed those out is you just take a syringe or a pipette, you suck some up and you put it in the tank. And with those, these last a long time, like 6 months to a year kind of minimum. Whereas the high density cultures only last around a month, similar to microworms. But you can only feed out of these regular cultures like every 4 days to maybe like a week. So, if you're trying to feed baby fish, that can be kind of annoying. So that's where the high density comes in. Because just like microworms, you can feed out of a high density culture basically every day. So, let me get set up here and I'll keep talking. For a high density culture, you can make it from a standard culture. What you'll want to do is do the high density culture, how I tell you later. And then basically you want to dump like a whole bottle of your standard culture in. And you'll want multiple bottles because it doesn't always work. And you don't want to lose your culture, So you'll want to, and you can make as many as you want, just follow the instructions, the previous instructions for the standard culture. But yeah, what you'll want to do is basically pour a whole bottle or half a bottle if it's big, into your mashed potatoes. And I find if you get them really soupy to start off with, like almost a liquid, it works a lot better. And then you can take your almost a liquid and put it into a more dry culture. I just find like that little step of transition helps. So there's that. But it's much easier to start with a high density culture, which I sell. So if you have a microworm culture or whatever, I talked about how to get go from regular to high density, and high density to regular too. Yeah, so now this is how you make a high density culture basically. What you'll need is some sort of container with a lid. This is just like one of them meal prep containers or whatever. And you'll want to cut a hole in the lid. And you'll want something to plug the hole. In this case, I have a cotton ball. So you're just going to shove your cotton ball or filter floss or, your finger if you want to stand there all day, I guess. Well, your finger wouldn't work. It needs to be able to breathe. So, yeah, you could use like some mesh or whatever. And then you're going to want to fill the bottom, which is some regular old mashed potatoes. Just like a microworm culture. And I have a video on how to do that too. I'll link it somewhere. Or even like a fly culture too, I guess. I also have a video on that. I'll link it somewhere. So then what you're gonna wanna do, if you don't already have a high density culture, what you're gonna wanna do is go ahead and pour in your standard culture right now. Well, the mashed potatoes are dry, and then you'll want to mix them up. I do not mean to shake that much. And then you're going to want to mix up the mashed potatoes till it's real soupy. You want it to be like well, like really, really soupy mashed potatoes, like almost a liquid, but still have a few good chunks in there, you know. And then, yeah. So anyways, since we already have a high density culture, I also sell high density starters. We don't need to do that. So we're gonna go half apple cider vinegar, half water. You could probably use whole apple cider vinegar, and it would help with mold and stuff, I assume, but I don't really have problems with it in these because of the apple cider vinegar. And if you watch my microworm video, I put cinnamon in those to help with mold. But again, in this, with these high density vinegar eels, I don't really have that problem, I guess because the pH is so low from the vinegar. You know, not much can really grow in there. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this up with the back of this paintbrush here, I guess. And we want it to be about the density, or consistency, density 2, I guess, of mashed potatoes. So going to go ahead and add a little bit more liquid here. Apple cider and then water. Try to get it in roughly the same amounts. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just like with microworms, these vinegar eels will kind of, you know, they'll even it out. So don't worry about getting it flat. You know, you want it to be kind of flat. Just, well, I mean, it probably doesn't even need to be kind of flat, really. You could probably make a giant mound of it and they'd sort it out, maybe. I don't know, never tried that, but I bet it would work. But anyways, you know, get it kind of flat. And y'all can see the consistency here. It's a little bit drier than I want it. You see how these mashed potatoes are all kind of clumping up? I want it to be a little bit more smooth than that. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water. Now a bit more apple cider vinegar. A little bit more water and we should be good. Alright. Kind of even this out. You can see how it's kind of even but still pretty chunky. And what you're going to want to do is just like with the regular culture I showed you before, I'm just going to take a little bit on the end of my paintbrush here and kind of sweep it across. Generally I do this with a spoon, but my dishwasher broke, so you know I don't want to dirty up a spoon. And a little bit more. There. This one back on track. So yeah, you may be able to see them in there. It's right there. So now what we're going to do is just put our lid on here. Let me wipe this paintbrush off in the tank here. And I may have forgot, but you'll also want a Sharpie to mark the date. Let me see what the date is here. It's May 3rd. So just gonna write 5/3. Just so I know whenever I started it. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that on the standard culture as well. 5/3. Alright. Let me get this lid on all the way. These lids can be kind of tough. here. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to do the feed out the high density. I already talked about how to do the standard one. I just take a pipette or something and get some up on there. So, as you may or may not be able to see, looks like may not, but there's a thin white kind of film looking stuff all along the edge here, and that's the vinegar eels. They climb the walls to get oxygen or something, I guess. I don't really know why they do it. Microworms do it as well. But this way you don't get any vinegar in your tanks if you're scared of vinegar for whatever reason. Or apple cider vinegar, I guess. But anyways, I just kind of scrape the sides of it with the paintbrush, just like in my microworm video. And now we have it on the tip of our brush. And I'm going to feed it to some fish. So I'll feed it to these guys. So what I do is I just come down with the paintbrush, dip it in the water just like that, and then I like to wiggle it around to get the vinegar eels going everywhere. You could also do this right in front of your filter and you wouldn't have to wiggle it around as much. Wherever you want to do it doesn't really matter. I do it next to my auto feeder because that's where the fish know to eat. So going down, and look how they swarm that. I'll give it a wiggle. And it's a feeding frenzy. We'll see if I can focus on these worms. Definitely not. They're way too small. But there you go. That's how I do my vinegar eels, both high density and not high density. I don't remember if I went over the differences in the beginning, to be honest, so I'm going to go ahead and go over them now again. With the standard vinegar eels, they last longer, but you can't feed them as often. And yeah. And with they're also more annoying to feed because you have to use a syringe. And honestly, I hardly ever feed regular vinegar eels. I just kind of keep the cultures around in case my high densities crash, to be honest. Yeah. So the regulars, standard, really liquidy ones, you can only feed them about every 4 to 7 days, feed out of them about 4 to 7 days. So if you're going to want to feed some fry or something like some rainbow fry, you have to have a lot of bottles. But on the bright side, they last like 6 months to a year, sometimes longer. Whereas with the high density, they only last like a month, but you could feed them every day, perhaps even multiple times a day, depending on how much you feed and how big your culture is and everything. So, yeah, that's the main differences. The high density, much easier to feed out and everything. And the standard, well, you can set it up and forget about it for a few months and you'll still have it. Whereas you can't do that, or at least not nearly as well or often, with the high density vinegar eels. But, you can't feed them as much either. So vinegar eels, they like to live at the top of the water. I guess. They live in very low pH, so they don't die immediately in your aquarium, but they will after, a period of time. I've never timed it, but that's just water, guys. Don't freak out. But I was talking about fish here. But, I've never timed how long it takes them to die. But, they're good for things, fry, all that. They're real small. Big fish will eat them too, like the larger rainbows you saw in there. They're a dwarf neon and bosemani mix. So They were like maybe 2-3 inches, probably bigger than that actually. They're getting kind of big. But yeah, big fish will eat them, little fish will eat them, but they're really good for, well, they're only really acceptable for fish that will eat off of the top of the water, which thankfully is most fish, but you know, like corridoras and loaches generally don't eat off of the top of the water. So vinegar eels are definitely not the best choice for them and their fry. Microworms or, you know, a whole bunch of other live foods. But microworms are kind of, to me, whenever I say microworms, I'm including banana worms and water worms. I think you only really need one, to be honest. Like, I think the standard microworm and then a vinegar eel, you know, I think that can feed basically any fish. You know, I mean, maybe there's some super tiny fry that couldn't eat a full-grown microworm, but, you know, they have babies too, so I never really understood the allure of like water worms, which are just smaller microworms. I think the fish could just eat, you know, like a baby microworm. But anyway, what do I know? I don't know. But yeah, the microworms sink, and they don't sink immediately. You know, they don't sink like a rock. They sink a little bit slower than like some of the slow sinking pellets and stuff. So your fish that eat from the top, they can eat microworms as well. But yeah, I sell every live food I've mentioned here, as well as probably some others, and also plants and shrimp and stuff. So if you want to buy my stuff, check the description of this video. And yeah, trying to get better at selling my stuff, because well, anyways, yeah, I mean, that's all I got to say. That's how I do my microworms. I like high density better than the standard, if you couldn't tell already. And oh, I forgot one thing. I also have fly cultures, and they will escape. All flies, they'll escape. They'll find they have ways. You can see there's a few dead ones right there, because I had 3 cultures in here. I got rid of 2 of them because they crashed. I'm going to make another one after I do this video. But it's really good to, if you have these fly cultures, and I sell these too, I would highly recommend either having or buying a microworm culture with it, because the flies will escape. And if you have the microworms, or not microworms, vinegar eels, and the standard one, guys, the flies are attracted to the vinegar, and then they'll go in there and they'll drown. So you don't have the escape flies you got to worry about. And you also have vinegar eels. You could also just put like a little dish of vinegar in there, but you know, I'd rather have the vinegar eels to, you know, feed out. And the flies don't hurt them. You know, I'm sure they probably eat them. It's probably good for them, I would think. Good at gut loading them. But yeah, I don't know if I mentioned that in my fly video, but I figured I'd mention it here if I didn't. And these flies work really good for feeding anything about guppy or bigger, somewhere in there, platies, all that stuff. That also eat from the top of the water. They really love eating those things. You can watch my video on culturing these to see that. And also my video on how to keep them at the correct temperature if you live somewhere that's hot. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Bye, guys. You should subscribe to my channel. You could be the 25th, maybe. I'll probably have another one by the time this video comes out, because it's going to come out like in a month, but whatever. You can be here pre-100, that's for sure. Plus, I'm doing some videos on CO2 and if glutaraldehyde actually works, so everybody wants to see that. You better subscribe for it.